Connection failed. The words blazed across the massive presentation screen in the glass-walled conference room of Al Mansour Technologies, as Sheikh Ahmed Al Mansour stood frozen in his expensive white kandura and traditional gutra. His carefully prepared investor presentation completely collapsed, his face transforming from confident authority to shocked disbelief as he gestured helplessly at the dead screen. Behind him, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Dubai skyline glittered in the afternoon sun, a view meant to impress the 12 international investors who had flown in from 3 continents, specifically for this crucial funding presentation. Those investors now sat uncomfortably around the polished conference table, some checking their watches, others whispering to colleagues, a few already gathering their materials, as if preparing to leave early from what was clearly becoming a disaster. Near the back of the room, almost invisible in his professional IT uniform, Darius Thompson stood with his laptop and technical equipment, his face showing calm professionalism, but his eyes revealing something deeper, a knowing expression that suggested he understood exactly what had just happened to sabotage this presentation and exactly why. Sheikh Ahmed barked commands at Darius to fix the problem immediately, to get the presentation working, his voice rising with each passing second, as the investors grew more restless, and the deal he had spent 18 months negotiating began slipping away in real time. But Darius remained calm, his fingers moving across his laptop keyboard with deliberate precision, accessing system logs that would show him not just what had failed, but who had caused it to fail, because technical problems like this didn't just happen during the most important presentation of a company's existence, unless someone had made them happen. What occurred in the next 90 minutes would cost Sheikh Ahmed a $300 million investment that would have saved his struggling company, expose a corporate espionage operation that had been running inside his organization for months, and reveal that the IT technician he had consistently dismissed as merely tech support, who should stay invisible and fix problems without being noticed, was actually someone whose expertise in cybersecurity and digital forensics was sophisticated enough to trace exactly how his presentation had been sabotaged, who had done it, and most devastatingly, why they had done it. Information that Darius was now deciding whether to share with the man who had never treated him with anything resembling respect. Darius Thompson had been working as senior IT technician for Al Mansour Technologies for 14 months, part of a small technical team that maintained the company's network infrastructure, supported employees with technology issues, and ensured that systems functioned reliably for a company that was trying to position itself as a major player in Gulf region technology services. He handled everything from basic troubleshooting to complex network security, working mostly behind the scenes to keep technology invisible and functional, the way effective IT support always did. To most employees at Al Mansour Technologies, including Sheikh Ahmed himself, Darius was simply the IT guy, someone you called when your computer wasn't working or when you needed technical support for a presentation, someone whose expertise you relied on, but whose actual knowledge and capabilities you never really thought about, because IT people were supposed to solve problems quietly without requiring acknowledgement. But Darius carried credentials and experience that went far beyond routine IT support work. He had a master's degree in cybersecurity from MIT, had worked for 5 years as a security consultant for a major firm that investigated corporate espionage and digital intrusion, and had taken the position at Al Mansour Technologies, specifically because the pay was competitive and the work seemed less stressful than the high-pressure consulting environment he had left. He had assumed he would be somewhat overqualified for the role, but had accepted that as a reasonable trade-off for better work-life balance. What he hadn't anticipated was how frequently his advanced skills would be needed, as he discovered that Al Mansour Technologies had serious security vulnerabilities and what appeared to be active insider threats that nobody else in the organization seemed to recognize or care about. Over 14 months, Darius had noticed concerning patterns in the company's network activity: unusual data transfers during off hours, unauthorized access attempts to confidential files, employee accounts exhibiting behavior inconsistent with their normal patterns. He had reported these concerns to management multiple times, recommending comprehensive security audits and stricter access controls. But his recommendations had been largely ignored, dismissed, as IT paranoia or unnecessary expense for a company that was struggling financially and couldn't afford to invest in security improvements that didn't generate immediate revenue. Sheikh Ahmed Al-Mansour was 53, founder and CEO of a technology services company that had grown rapidly in its first decade, but had struggled in recent years as competition intensified, and some major contracts failed to materialize. He was a charismatic salesman who excelled at pitching, vision, and attracting initial interest from investors and clients, but he lacked deep technical knowledge and had built a company culture that prioritized sales and presentation over operational security and technical excellence. He treated technical staff as necessary overhead rather than strategic assets, people who should keep systems running invisibly without bothering executives with complicated security concerns that didn't directly impact revenue. The company desperately needed the $300 million investment that today's presentation was meant to secure. The funding would allow Al-Mansour Technologies to expand operations, acquire competitors, and establish market dominance in several key sectors. Sheikh Ahmed had spent 18 months courting this investor consortium, carefully building relationships, crafting the perfect pitch, and preparing a presentation that would showcase the company's potential and justify the massive valuation he was claiming. Everything depended on this presentation going flawlessly. And 15 minutes into what should have been a 90-minute presentation, the entire system had crashed spectacularly. The presentation screen had frozen, then displayed connection errors, then gone completely black. Sheikh Ahmed's carefully prepared slides were inaccessible. The financial projections and market analysis he needed to show investors had disappeared. The demonstration of the company's technology platform that was supposed to prove their capabilities was impossible to access. It was a catastrophic technical failure at the worst possible moment. And Sheikh Ahmed's immediate reaction was to blame the IT support for not having backup systems in place, for allowing this to happen during such a critical meeting. He had snapped his fingers at Darius, who had been stationed in the room specifically to handle any technical issues, and demanded that he fix the problem immediately. His tone was sharp and contemptuous, treating Darius as an incompetent subordinate who had failed at basic responsibilities. The investors watched this interaction uncomfortably, and Darius noticed several of them exchanging glances that suggested they were drawing conclusions about the company's professionalism and operational competence based on how the CEO handled this crisis. Darius moved calmly to investigate the problem, connecting his laptop to the presentation system to run diagnostics. What he discovered within minutes was that this wasn't a random technical failure or a simple compatibility issue. Someone had deliberately sabotaged the presentation by introducing malware into the system that would trigger during the meeting, corrupting files and disrupting connections at a predetermined time. It was sophisticated and deliberate, and Darius's immediate analysis of the system logs told him exactly when the malware had been introduced, from which user account, and most importantly, that the sabotage had come from inside the company. What Sheikh Ahmed didn't know, what he had never bothered to learn despite 14 months of Darius working for his company, was that Darius wasn't just capable of fixing basic IT problems. He was an expert in digital forensics who could trace intrusions and identify attackers with the same sophistication that law enforcement cybercrime units employed. And within 20 minutes of investigating the crashed presentation system, Darius had traced the sabotage to a specific employee account, had identified the exact timing and method of the attack, and had discovered something even more disturbing. The sabotage wasn't isolated. Diving deeper into system logs, while Sheikh Ahmed grew increasingly agitated and investors grew increasingly restless, Darius found evidence of a systematic corporate espionage operation that had been running inside Al-Mansour Technologies for at least 6 months. Someone had been stealing confidential information, copying financial records and strategic plans and client lists, routing that data to external servers. The presentation sabotage was just the most visible attack in a long-running campaign to destroy the company from within. And Darius recognized the digital signature of the attacks. He had reported similar suspicious activity to management 3 months earlier, flagging unusual data transfers from several employee accounts and recommending immediate investigation. His report had been dismissed by Sheikh Ahmed's chief operating officer as IT overreach, with explicit instructions to stop bothering executives with security paranoia and focus on keeping systems running. Now those same suspicious accounts had just sabotaged the most important presentation in the company's history. Darius stood at his laptop, watching the evidence compile, facing a decision about what to do with this information. He could tell Sheikh Ahmed immediately what he had discovered, potentially giving him information that could salvage the investor meeting if handled correctly. Or he could stay silent, let the meeting continue to fail, and allow the consequences of ignoring his security warnings to play out fully. Sheikh Ahmed had never treated him with respect, had dismissed his expertise repeatedly, had created a culture where IT security was seen as an annoying expense rather than a critical protection. Why should Darius save him now? But as he watched the investors preparing to leave, as he considered the 100+ employees whose jobs depended on this company's survival, Darius made a choice that surprised even himself. He walked to the front of the conference room, interrupted Sheikh Ahmed's flustered attempts to apologize to investors, and spoke with quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. "Sheikh Ahmed, I need to inform everyone in this room of something critical," Darius said clearly. "This presentation failure wasn't a technical accident. Your system was deliberately sabotaged by malware introduced from inside your company approximately 6 hours ago. I can trace the exact source and identify who is responsible. But more importantly, this sabotage is part of a larger corporate espionage operation that has been stealing your confidential information for at least 6 months. An operation I reported to your management 3 months ago in a security assessment that was ignored." The room went completely silent. Sheikh Ahmed's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. The investors leaned forward with sudden intense interest, because what had seemed like incompetent IT support had just become something far more intriguing. Darius continued, his voice steady and professional. "I can provide detailed forensic evidence of the intrusion, identify the compromised accounts, and trace where your stolen data has been sent. I can also recover your presentation and get it running within 15 minutes if you want to continue this meeting. But I want everyone here to understand that the failure you just witnessed isn't a reflection of technical incompetence. It's evidence of a sophisticated insider threat that this company's leadership chose to ignore when I identified it months ago." Sheikh Ahmed looked like he wanted to explode. But one of the lead investors spoke first. "Show us the evidence," the investor said, "and explain exactly what you found." For the next 45 minutes, Darius transformed the failed investor presentation into something completely different. Using his laptop and the recovered presentation screen, he walked the investors through a detailed forensic analysis of the corporate espionage operation. He showed them logs proving systematic data theft. He demonstrated how the sabotage malware had been introduced. He traced the stolen information to servers controlled by one of Al-Mansur Technology's main competitors. And he identified 3 employee accounts that had been compromised, including one belonging to a senior executive who had apparently been recruited or coerced into enabling the espionage. The investors were fascinated. Several of them had backgrounds in technology and security, and they recognized immediately that they were watching an expert presentation from someone with sophisticated capabilities. They asked detailed technical questions, and Darius answered each one with precision that demonstrated deep knowledge. By the time he finished, the investors understood they had just witnessed not a technology failure, but rather a technology success, watching a security expert identify and document a major threat in real time. Then Darius did something that Sheikh Ahmed would never forget. He turned to the CEO and said clearly, in front of all the investors, "I reported concerns about these exact vulnerabilities 3 months ago. I recommended comprehensive security audits and improved access controls. My recommendations were dismissed as unnecessary expense and IT paranoia. If those recommendations had been implemented, this espionage operation would have been detected months ago, and today's sabotage would have been prevented. This failure isn't technical, it's organizational and cultural." One of the investors asked the obvious question, "Why are you working as an IT technician if you have this level of expertise?" Darius smiled slightly. "I have a master's in cybersecurity from MIT and 5 years of experience in corporate security consulting. I took this position because I wanted less stressful work. What I found instead was a company with serious security problems and leadership that didn't value the expertise they had hired. Today's sabotage is what happens when companies treat security professionals as expendable overhead instead of strategic assets." The meeting continued, but not in the way Sheikh Ahmed had planned. The investors asked Darius more questions than they asked the CEO. They wanted to understand the full scope of the security breach, what other vulnerabilities existed, what it would cost to properly secure the company. Darius answered honestly, outlining a comprehensive security overhaul that would be expensive but necessary. And then one of the investors made an unexpected proposal. We're not going to invest $300 million in a company with these security problems and this leadership culture, the investor said bluntly. But we're very interested in investing in a properly secured company with better governance. Here's our offer. We'll provide the funding, but only with conditions. First, comprehensive security overhaul designed and overseen by your IT specialist here. Second, he gets promoted to Chief Information Security Officer with full authority over security decisions and direct board reporting. Third, independent security audit with full remediation of identified problems. Fourth, investigation and prosecution of everyone involved in the espionage. If you accept these terms, we'll fund you. If not, we walk. Sheikh Ahmed looked stunned. He had come to this meeting expecting to pitch his company on his terms. Instead, his IT technician had just become the most important person in the room, and his funding was now conditional on empowering someone he had consistently dismissed and disrespected. But he was also a pragmatist who understood when he had no leverage. He accepted the terms. The following months were transformative for Al Mansour Technologies. Darius, in his new role as CISO with full authority, conducted a comprehensive security overhaul that identified and fixed dozens of vulnerabilities. The corporate espionage investigation led to criminal charges against 3 employees and a competitor company, generating substantial publicity that positioned Al Mansour Technologies as a company that took security seriously. The $300 million investment came through as promised, but now it was funding a company with proper security governance. For Sheikh Ahmed, the experience was humbling but ultimately educational. He had built a company culture that undervalued technical expertise and ignored security concerns, and that culture had nearly destroyed everything. The IT technician he had treated as invisible overhead had turned out to be the most valuable person in the organization, someone whose expertise had both exposed critical threats and attracted investor confidence. Sheikh Ahmed never forgot the lesson about assumptions and respect. For Darius, the transformation from dismissed IT technician to empowered CISO vindicated his decision to speak up during the sabotaged presentation. He had risked Sheikh Ahmed's anger by publicly exposing the company's security failures in front of investors, but that risk had resulted in the authority he needed to actually fix the problems he had identified. His story became known in cybersecurity circles as an example of how technical experts in subordinate positions often see threats that leadership misses, and how empowering those experts, rather than dismissing them, could mean the difference between security and catastrophic breach. Before we wrap this story up, I'd like to thank you for reaching this far. And if you enjoyed this story as much as I think you did, then be sure to show your support by liking and subscribing, so this channel can reach more people like you. Now, back to the story. And the sabotaged presentation became a case study taught in business schools about corporate espionage, insider threats, and the critical importance of security culture. The technical failure that had seemed like a disaster had actually been an opportunity, revealing problems that would have eventually destroyed the company while there was still time to fix them. But that opportunity had only been realized because one IT technician had the expertise to investigate what happened, the courage to speak truth publicly, and the integrity to insist on proper security, even when it meant challenging his CEO in front of investors. Years later, Darius would reflect that the sabotage had been the best thing that could have happened to Al Mansour Technologies, because it had forced conversations about security and expertise that the company desperately needed but had been avoiding. And Sheikh Ahmed would acknowledge that his contemptuous treatment of his IT staff had nearly cost him everything, but had ultimately taught him that the people he had dismissed as overhead were actually the experts whose knowledge protected everything he had built.